to do that this week, that's fine. Okay, got it. Done. I just saw it. Okay, shukran. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا يا همة الشيخ اهدنا بهذا المحضر ولا تعطفيننا بنظرة تأتينا بالظفر. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so last week we went over the author's introduction and also some of the first part or the first section of Imam Tahawi's Aqidah regarding the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This week, we're going to continue with that section. So before we go on, we're going to go over the 13 attributes of Allah, and we'll see their arguments, and we'll see the reasoning behind them throughout this course. But the 13 attributes, this is basically, so there is some criticism of the Ash'aris, the Ash'airah, and the Maturidis regarding these attributes from the Atharis, from the people who stick closer to the text without adding to it. And they basically they criticize the Ash'airah and the Maturidis for limiting Allah's attributes to 13 or 20 or 7 or whatever. And they also criticize them for saying that these attributes they say things about Allah that Allah doesn't say about himself. And this is from a fundamental misunderstanding of what these attributes represent. So basically, what these attributes represent is that if there is a God, if there is one all-powerful being and a creator, what are the essential attributes that he must have in order for his existence to be true? What are the essential attributes or the essential description of the being of God? And basically those are 5 attributes, and they're the essential attribute, as-sifat al-nafsiyya, and the negative attributes, as-sifat al-salbiyya. Now, these attributes, we're not, and actually, we're going to see that they actually do have textual evidence from the Quran. But basically what these attributes are is, before we get into, who God is, we have to determine, what we mean by God. And so basically, God has to have all of the attributes of perfection that are different to the attributes of creation, which are attributes that are contingent. And so basically, these attributes are attributes that for the first attribute is existence, and that's wajibu wujudihi. His existence is absolutely necessary. Without his existence, then nothing could exist. Why is that? Because everything apart from him is contingent. Everything apart from him, it could possibly exist and possibly not exist. And hold on one second. Sorry about that. There's kids. Okay, so without his existence, nothing else could exist because everything else had a beginning, and everything that has a beginning needs something to make it exist. And so God's existence is absolutely necessary. And then the other attributes, the other attributes are as-sifat as-salbiya, which are negative attributes. That's a literal translation. But what they mean is that these attributes are attributes that negate their opposite. These attributes that negate their opposite. And so, for example, eternity without beginning, al-qidam, it actually negates any beginning for Allah. So he cannot have a beginning. And his attribute of eternity without end negates that there's an end. His self-subsistence, al-qiyam bi nafsihi, negates that he depends on anything else. And his difference to contingent beings, al-mukhalafatu lil-hawadith, it negates that he has any semblance to anything else. And his oneness negates multiplicity. And so all of these attributes, from these attributes, basically we know that what we presented in the last class, that God is in one sphere, is God, all of his attributes of perfection, his being and everything of perfection, and creation is in another category, and they don't mix. And so everything that creation is, God is different to it. And that's what we understand from these attributes. And so that's why we have these attributes. Is not an effort to describe God. It's an effort to know what we can call God, and that is knowing God through his opposites. Now, this is different to the way of tasawwuf, which is knowing God through God. That's a different type of knowing. And like I said, we should combine between the two. We don't leave one for the other. And so we basically God is known through the opposites. And what's the opposite of wajib al-wujud, necessary existence? The opposite is existence that is only possible, or contingent existence. What's the opposite of eternity without beginning? The opposite of that is having a beginning. And so we know that creation has a beginning, so God cannot have a beginning. What's the opposite of eternity without end? It's something that's terminal. And so we know that creation is terminal and has an end, so God cannot have an end. And all of these attributes, they describe things that their opposite is impossible for God. Later, the affirmative attributes are attributes that we know and affirm through revelation. So they are the attributes about which we have gotten the knowledge of them through revelation. And so there's a sifat al-ma'ani, affirmative attributes that we affirm their meaning for God, and it's ilm, omniscience, or knowledge, and the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is limitless. So nothing adds to his knowledge and nothing takes away from his knowledge. And al-hayat, and the life of Allah, and the life of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolute. It does not resemble the life of our lives. Our life is supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly, and it depends on so many different means that Allah has made the means to support our life: air, water, food, exercise. All of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the means for supporting our life, and Allah needs none of it. His life is absolute. And then al-qudra, or power, and his power is the power to do what he wills with anything that is possible. So any contingent being that can possibly exist, then his power connects to it. And al-irada, a will, and that is his willing, or his decreeing things, as his knowledge knew they should be. And then al-kalam, speech. Allah speaks, but he does not use sounds, letters, or appendages. Sam' and al-basar, hearing and seeing, they're the same. Allah hears and sees, but he does not hear and see through appendages or through sounds or any other means. These attributes are absolute, and with regard to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I mentioned these 13 attributes. We're actually going to go into them in depth when we go into al-Kharida al-Bahiyya. But I mentioned them because a lot of the textualists, they pretend, or they accuse the Ash'ari, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis of inventing these attributes. But I mentioned these here because with the exception of a sifat al-nafsiyya, existence, which we have already discussed that existence, Imam al-Tahawi does not touch this particular attribute because he takes for granted that the people that he is speaking to know that Allah exists. And so he does not come from the argument about whether or not Allah exists. And so that is not here in this text. However, the arguments for the mention of the rest of these attributes are in the text of Imam al-Tahawi. And so we're actually gonna see that, inshallah. And so that's why I mentioned these attributes. So he says, Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lah, wa la shay'a mithluhu, wa la shay'a yu'jizuhu, wa la ilaha ghayruhu. Allah is one. He has no partner. Nothing is similar to him. Nothing incapacitates him. There is no God but he. So Allah is one, and the Arabic word used here is wahid. And so some people say, because Allah has used both wahid and ahad in the Quran, and in Surah Al-Ikhlas, Allah says, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, and he used the name ahad. And he used wahid in other places in the Quran. For example, say, He is Allah, the one, the irresistible. Qul huwa Allahu al-wahid al-qahhar. And so say he is Allah, the one, the irresistible. So Allah used both words in the Quran. So some scholars are of the opinion that they are two synonyms. They have the same meaning. Others say that each one carries a meaning that the other does not. And so it has been said that wahid refers to the attributes, while ahad refers to being. Now, so ahad, we know from the Arabic that ahad is a word that it gives the meaning of oneness, but not in terms of number. It gives the meaning of oneness, but not in terms of number. That in and of itself in the Arabic language is like that. And so it's a oneness of which there's no two or three. A multiplicity is impossible in that regard. And then wahid is literally one. And so in the Arabic language, wahid there would be a possibility of two or three. But when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that he is wahid, la thani lahu. He is one, and there's no second to him. Like he's a one. It's a oneness without any second. And so some of them said that the wahid refers to the attributes, while ahad refers to the being. And Muhammad al-Azhari al-Harawi, he said, one, when referring to the attributes of Allah, has two meanings. The first is that he is one, he has no equal, and nothing resembles him. The Arabs say, so-and-so is one among his people, to indicate that he has no equal. Fulan wahid fi qawmihi. Fulanun wahid fi qawmihi means so-and-so is one among his people, to indicate that he has no equal. The second meaning is that he is one God and one Lord who has no partner in his divinity nor in his lordship. And Tawheed, some people say Tawheed is to negate the possibility of any partner, any co-participant, and any semblance. Thus, Allah is one in his acts. He has no partner in his causing created beings to exist. And this is very important for the people of Tasawwuf, because it, many times we understand the meaning of madad in terms of the sheikh doing something for us, when in reality the sheikh, as Sheikh Sukairi said, the sheikh is a servant of Allah who calls to Allah in his presence, and the doer is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Sidna Shaykh radiallahu anhu, and he said in the training, about the training and everything, that the sheikh is a guide and one who directs, but he is not the one who acts, meaning that the sheikh, his purpose is to be the means of guidance. He's the means of your madad. He's the means by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you, everything. But the real doer is Allah, and you cannot lose sight of that. And so Allah in his acts has no partner. In his acts, Allah has no partner. No one can either influence Allah to do something or not to do anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what he wills, and he says, fa'anun lima yurid. He says he constantly does whatever he wills. And so he has no partner in his acts, his causing created beings to exist. He is one in his essence. He is neither divided nor composed of multiple parts. and he is one in his deserving of worship, as we are going to see. So he has no partner. So Imam al-Tahawi, he took Allah is one, and then he explained Allah is one in certain details in order to leave no doubt and to leave no room for ambiguity as to Allah's oneness. So the first thing that he said, he has no partner. He has no partner. Because he has no partner. The Arabic is la sharika lah. La sharika lah. And so la sharik, it comes from the word ishtirak. And he has no partner. Ishtirak means equality. So in Arabic means equality. So having a partner would mean that he would have an equal. And that is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this negates his having a partner in his essence, and that's the negation of the position of the dualists. So who are the dualists? And actually, the dualism applies somewhat to many different people today. How many of us have heard, and this is a question for y'all, how many of us have heard good things come from Allah and bad things come from Shaitan? And what should be our understanding of good things come from Allah and bad things come from Shaitan? Okay, so good things come from Allah and bad things come from Shaitan. This is a statement of adab with the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Out of adab with Allah, we don't attribute anything bad to him. However, people that affirm as a reality that everything bad comes from Shaitan have made Shaitan into a God apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this dualism actually can apply to many different people, and specifically, the Christian doctrine that Shaitan is the owner of hell, and that Shaitan, if Shaitan is able to manipulate their lives. This is a completely batil belief. And it actually, has roots in some form to the dualists who, and the dualists to whom he's referring, or who we're referring here, they're the Persian fire worshippers before Islam. So they believed that, or the Zoroastrians believed that there were two creator gods, one good and one bad. Or that God had his essence, or his being was divided into two, and one good and one bad. And this is batil. And so he is one in his essence. And he is one in his name and in being deserving of worship. And that is a negation of the polytheist Arabs. The polytheist Arabs and many different polytheists in the world actually believe that there was one creator God. But then they singled out other deities that they had assigned for worship, and they called them gods. And so this is Allah is one. He has no partner in his name, meaning that he has no partner in being God, and he has no partner in being deserving of worship. And he is one in his attributes. And this is a negation of the anthropomorphists and others that assigned Allah attributes from his creation. And so Allah has no partner in any of that. Allah is one. And then he goes on, he says, nothing is similar to him. And Allah says in the Quran, there's nothing whatsoever like him. And this verse or this ayah of Quran is unequivocal in its meaning. And all the ambiguous descriptions in the Quran and Hadith are interpreted through it. And so when you see, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim, then Allah's hand is above their hands, then the first thing that you do is you affirm that there is nothing whatsoever like him. And so by doing that, then you negate that his hand is like the hands of creation. Nothing incapacitates him. So this is a statement of his perfect power. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has perfect power over all things. So the existence of everything apart from Allah is through his causing it to exist. So is it reasonable to believe, for example, you create a robot, you have absolute control over that robot, it doesn't have any autonomy except the autonomy that you gave it. And then you want to create another robot. Would that robot that you created, that you have absolute control over, be able to stop you from creating another robot? The answer is no. So Allah, from whom everything gets its existence, and on whom they depend for their continued existence, nothing is able to incapacitate him. Nothing can make him unable to do whatever he does or whatever he wants to do. And one of the proofs from the Quran is the ayat, is not the one who created the heavens and the earth capable of creating the like of them? Yes. And he is the all-knowing, expert creator. And this is from Surah Yasin. And then Imam al-Tahawi finishes up this, with an emphatic statement: there's no God but he. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. And this is a negation that anything other than him deserves worship. And so Imam al-Tahawi lists all of these attributes of perfection. Allah is one. He has no partner. Nothing is similar to him, and nothing incapacitates him. And then he says, there's no God but he. So what is he actually saying here? What he's saying is, if you're going to worship, then it has to be the one who has no partner, to whom nothing is similar, and whom nothing can incapacitate. If it's not him, if this is not who you're worshiping, then there's no God but the God that I've just described. Basically, if this is not the one that you're worshiping, then you need to correct your worship and correct your belief, because nothing other than him deserves to be worshipped. And so it's an emphatic statement to close out, this section on Allah's oneness. Are there any questions or doubts before we move on to the next section, inshallah? Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on, inshallah. But first, we can say that Allah's oneness is mentioned in this text. And so out of these 13 attributes, we have mentioned the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so his oneness has been mentioned. He goes on and he describes some more attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, qadimun bila ibtida, da'imun bila intiha, la yafna wa la yabidu. Okay, what's going on? Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody hear me? Let me know if y'all can hear me in the chat, please. Okay. It took away the sharing. I don't know what's going on. Okay. So he says, qadimun bila ibtida, da'imun bila intiha, la yafna wa la yabid, wa la yakunu illa ma yurid. So he says, he is eternal without beginning and perpetually existing without end. He neither perishes nor ceases to exist, and nothing is except that which he wills. So he is eternal without beginning. So it is necessary that he be without beginning, because if he had a beginning, he would need something to cause him to exist. And so this right here, he is eternal without beginning and perpetually existing without end, along with the argument for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the existence of his being. This is what is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. Basically, the idea is this, what's the proof that you are a contingent being? What's the proof that you're a contingent being? Meaning, what's the proof that you're a being that at one point didn't exist and, later began to exist? What's the evidence of that? So the evidence is there is, that we know necessarily that at one point we didn't exist, because we were all born. So we know that we didn't exist forever. And so every contingent being needs something or someone to create it. Now, what was the means of our creation? Our mother and father. But our mother and father, did they always exist? Or were they born and some of them have already passed away? We know that they were born. That's evidence. And at some point, the humanity began to exist, because we know even from the fossil record that human beings didn't always exist. We know that the world, the earth didn't always exist. So the earth, its natural its your natural environment, these processes that we have come to know as the means for the existence of a human being, we know that it could not have itself cause us to exist. Why? Because if every contingent being or thing relies upon another contingent thing, and so forth, back for all time, then that's known as at-tasalsul. At-tasalsul. And that is when you have a infinite regress. And infinite regress is impossible. Why? Because you don't have something that's in movement. If somebody, for example, if somebody's walking, you meet somebody somewhere and they're walking from somewhere, and you ask them where they're coming from, and they say, "No place, I've always been walking." That doesn't make sense. If something's in motion, then it didn't just stay in motion forever. Something had to happen to put it in motion. And so infinite regress is impossible. So all contingent beings, no matter how far back you go, 4.3 billion years, 10 billion years, however long we're talking about the age of the universe, it doesn't matter how far back you go. It all has to depend upon an eternal, beginningless being. Otherwise, there would be infinite regress, which is impossible. So that's the proof that Allah has to be eternal without beginning. SubhanAllah. He is eternal without beginning, because all contingent beings must go back to an eternal being. And that eternal being is the being that we worship. And from the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ الْأَوَّلُ. He is the first, meaning, and that is the meaning of he is the first. His existence precedes all existence. And he is perpetually existing without end. And this attribute is a result of his being without beginning, since his being without beginning negates non-existence. So if he always existed, then it's impossible for him not to exist. Thus, he must exist forever without end. And without end here was mentioned as an emphasis to indicate that his perpetuity, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his eternity, is not connected to time. And so Allah is the creator of time. So he's not subject to time. He created time and place, and he exists outside of time and place. This is like, we have to understand that, in order to have a correct belief about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And nothing that exists in time and place can influence that which exists outside of time and place. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ الْأَوَّلُ وَالْآخِرُ. And the last, he is the last being. His existence will perpetuate after everything else ceases to exist. He neither perishes nor ceases to exist. It is said that by the former, Imam Tahawi referred to the divine essence, and by the latter, he negated the cessation of his life and his attributes. And in reality, Allah's attributes, his essence and his attributes neither perish nor cease to exist. They abide forever, and he is self-subsistent. And so, لا يفنى ولا يبيد ولا يكون لا يفنى ولا يبيد. قديم بلا ابتداء، دائم بلا انتهاء، لا يفنى ولا يبيد ولا يكون إلا لا يفنى ولا يبيد. These four attributes are the mention of al-qidam and al-baqa. Al-qidam and al-baqa. And so why are we doing why are we finding these attributes in the Creed of Imam al-Tahawi? Because it's important to know that even though Imam Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, he codified, this science, and Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, he codified the science. These ideas are transmitted. These ideas are transmitted. So they didn't just create these ideas out of nowhere. And nothing is except that which he wills. And this is the proof of Allah's will or irada. And so actually will and irada, inshallah, we're going to see later on, because Imam al-Tahawi delves into it in detail. But he mentions it here. And so we have 4 of the 13 attributes that we have already seen in the text of Imam al-Tahawi. And next week, inshallah, we are going to start on, because the next part is his mukhalafatun lil hawadith, his difference to contingent beings. La tablughuhu al-awham wa la tudrikuhu al-afham wa la yushbihuhu al-anam. Hayyun la yamut, qayyumun la yanam, khaliqun bila haja, raziqun bila mu'na, mumitun bila makhafa, ba'ithun bila mashaqqa. And we're going to see these particular attributes, inshallah, next week. Are there any questions before we close out, inshallah? Are there any questions? If not, inshallah, we'll close out. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.